All right, so this week we're moving on from Pythagorean theorem. We're going to look at a couple key pieces kind of the next couple weeks that help us get prepared for next year. So we're going to start with some a data piece. So first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at scatter plots. So a scatter plot is a graph that shows the relationship between two data sets. The two data sets are graphed as ordered pairs in a coordinate plane. So coordinate plane means we're representing it on a graph. Remember, an ordered pair is an XY pair. So when we talk ordered pairs, we're talking X, Y. So X would be the X axis label, and then Y would be the Y axis label. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at this data set. I'm going to read it as we look at it. So it says the scatter plot here at the left shows the amount of fat in grams and the number of calories in 12 different restaurants. So we took data from 12 restaurants, we plotted them on this scatter plot. Now, each individual point is going to represent a restaurant. So if there's 12 restaurants, we have 12 points. On the left side, we have the calories, and on the bottom, we have fat grams. So the first question says, how many calories, let me show it to you. A, how many calories are in the sandwich that contains 17 grams of fat? On a scatter plot, we're just trying to locate the point that identifies with that value. So if you have 17 grams of fat, we are going to look at the 17. We're going to find the 17 on the grams of fat. And what we would do is we would go on up and see what point it matches. Now, if you notice, I started a little bit further in. I had to go out a little to represent and meet that point. So that first answer would say, you know what? If we go to the other axes, 400. So fat grams, 17 fat grams with 400 calories. Part B, how many grams of fat are in the sandwich that contains 600 calories? So now we're starting with 600 calories. So we start on the calorie side. We go to 600 and we're going to trace that line and we get to this point. Now that point corresponds with 30 grams of fat. So we would say there are 30 grams of fat for 600 calories at that restaurant. C asks a great question. What tends to happen to the number of calories as the number of grams of fat increases? Well, they're asking a general question. I'm actually going to use this one. They're asking a general question. As we start to go up this way, what tends to happen to the points? They tend to go up. So what we would say is, we could say something like, as the fat increases, the calories increase. And that's how we would describe that trend, right? We would say as this gets higher, this gets higher. And what we always do, since this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis, since a coordinate goes x comma y, we always put the x as the first statement and the y as the second statement. So as fat increases, calories increase. So that's how we always wanted to describe that. And that's how we can interpret scatter plots when we have them. Here's another way we can interpret a scatter plot is the trend in the data. And we kind of looked at it there. A scatter plot can show a relationship that exists between two data sets. So we have a positive linear relationship. So let's focus on the positive. It's going in an upward direction. So that's what leads to that positive piece. The linear piece, that refers to that those points are kind of in a straight line. They're obviously not in a direct straight line, but we can see that if I kind of trace on both sides of them, of all the data, we have kind of that forward trending data. If we look here, we have decreasing data. It's getting lower. So as x is getting higher, the y is getting lower, or the y is decreasing. And again, we can see it's kind of in that straight line. So we would say this is a negative linear relationship. So there's a negative relationship between this data set. This one's nonlinear. Now, we talked about nonlinear earlier in the year, that it's curved, and we can definitely, if we draw kind of those lines, like we look at the general trend of that data, it is definitely in a curving upward direction. So that's nonlinear. And then the last one, no relationship. There's not, I mean, that's just kind of all over the place. That's a scatter plot that there's really not a pattern. There's not a trend. So the key is no pattern. And when we see no pattern, we would say, you know what, there's no relationship there. So that's kind of identifying. When it says identify the relationship, it also has another word, and it's called a correlation, which we'll get to in the next video. And that is how we can interpret a scatter plot.